I don't care who you are or where you're at or what you're doing. If you call yourself a conservative in North America, you might want to stop what you're doing and watch this video. Because I promise you, by the time you get to the end of it, your jaw is going to be open and you'll look in the mirror and say, wow, that's me and I had no idea. What happened? I thought I was someone who valued the Constitution and stood in line with the Founding Fathers. Apparently I don't. And there's evidence for this today. I'm sure a lot of people are already scratching their heads and maybe already typing and wagging their fingers at the phone or the computer or whatever you're watching. But mark my words, once I show you this video today, you're going to have a completely new take on modern conservatism, quote unquote, and what the Founding Fathers envisioned for this country. We've had this big argument going on for decades now about capitalism versus socialism. And many people have come to the channel and say, Florida Maquis, you are confusing socialism with the proper and right functioning of government as our founding fathers intended. Really? Well, why don't we go back and take a quick peek at the 27 grievances that were listed officially against the king and the reason that we had a revolution in this country. There are 3 of them that I think a lot of conservatives would scratch their heads at and go, wait a minute, they had a problem with that? This is the case. But first, real quick, thank you. I always want to be diligent and remember to say thank you to everyone who continues to join us here at the Florida Maquis YouTube channel. Whether you agree with me, whether you disagree with me, no matter what you think, as long as we maintain a level of decorum, we can always have a good adult conversation. But over at the Patreon channel, where it's only $1 per month, we can kind of take the gloves off a little bit. We could even show images that would get me demonetized here for sure. Just ask anyone who's been over there. It's only $1 per month, even less if you sign up for an entire year. Lowest allowable level, only one level for everybody. And fully refundable. First 90 days, no risk to you. We can partner with Vimeo so that we don't really have to worry about what Google thinks or doesn't think about the video. You see, it's about psychological operations, the idea that you can influence people and make them literally change their own values without them knowing it. And that's what's happened here. Now, a lot of people are like, no, my values have stayed the same. I am right in line with the Founding Fathers. Really? I put together this acronym some years ago talking about the issue in Venezuela, but now it's applying here in North America. You see, some people said, Florida Maquis, it seems like you want us to become a socialist country. I'm not saying that. We are already, and have been for a very long time, a socialist country, but it wasn't always that way. You see, we introduced a lot of socialism, a lot of government control, meaning that whenever there's a problem or whenever there's an issue, North Americans just pick up a phone and dial 911. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's the police or the fire or whatever first responder. And if it's not that, there's always the civil courts. You can just call the police directly. You can sue people. The government is the answer for every problem in North America, is it not? If you can't solve it yourself, you just run to government. Now, let's talk about these grievances. There were 27 of them. But let's talk about grievance number 10. Talking of the king here. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers, you can actually read this as bureaucracies, to harass our people and eat out their substance. After the passage of the Stamp Act, stamp distributors were appointed in every considerable town. 1766 and 67 acts for the collection of duties created swarms of officers, all of whom received high salaries. And when in 1768 Admiralty and Vice Admiralty courts were established on a new basis, an increase in the number of officers was made. The high salaries and extensive prerequisites of all these were paid with the people's money, and thus swarms of officers ate out their substance. This is about local bureaucracies doing all sorts of things that we're trying to fight against here in Florida. Now, when people talk about complaints against the king and the reason that we revolted, they talk about these: no taxation without representation, king has absolute power, colonists not allowed to speak out against the king, blah, blah, blah. You know all of these. Well, look at this story out of California. LAPD Union says officers should not respond to these 28 different radio calls. Now, when you see these 28 radio calls that they're not going to respond to, a lot of conservatives would say this is the beginning of anarchy and chaos, and they're collapsing, and civilized society is just going to completely fall apart. And if you don't think that's the case, this was covered on Fox News in that context. This is 1 March 2023, and this is the Next News Network. Now, there's far right as you can get talking about this exact story. Is this the beginning of anarchy? Now, you might ask, well, what are the 28 calls? You ready for this? This is what they're not going to send a cop out for anymore. See if I can zoom this in. Non-criminal, non-violent, homeless, and quality of life related calls. Meaning if you get up in the morning and there's a bunch of homeless people sleeping on your sidewalk, they're not sending a cop. Non-criminal mental health calls. If they're talking to themselves and they're talking to the space aliens that are coming down to save them, not going to do anything. Non-violent juvenile disturbances or juveniles beyond parental control. Meaning kids won't go to school, not going to send a cop. See, so far, a lot of people are like, well, yeah, okay, so what? That makes sense. Public health order violations. That means, yes, you can't call a cop on somebody for not wearing a mask, but you can't also call a cop on somebody who is near naked walking into a local food establishment wanting to be served. Nonviolent calls for service at city parks. That has a lot to do with events that go on, sometimes that are a little bit unseemly at city parks. Under the influence calls, where there's no other crime in progress, just being drunk in public, no more cops. No more cops for welfare checks. Not even as a courtesy for doctors and hospitals. Non-fatal vehicle accidents. Parking violations, driveway tow, abandoned vehicles, people dumping trash. No more cops, even if it's on your property. Vicious and dangerous dogs. Until they bite somebody, no. Calls for service for loud noise, loud music, or party calls that are anonymous and have no victim. Well, I mean, how are you going to prove you're a victim? Landlord-tenant disputes. I mean, literally, that's, theft. If people haven't paid their rent or they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing on a certain premises, they can't be removed from somebody else's property. Syringe disposal, DOT standby, homeless encampments, panhandling, illegal vending, meaning prostitution, illegal gambling, fireworks, defecating, urinating in public. No indication of foul play. Just that 927D. I can't even speak about that here. Look up 927D, where no indication of foul play is involved. You see, that's... Everybody would look at this and be like, wait a minute, that sounds like anarchy. Well, you see, there are dozens and dozens of other offices. Now, they're not going to call cops. You see, this is the point here. There are other agencies, dozens of other agencies that can be called to deal with all of those problems. Now, that is the very definition of swarms of officers. Who do you think is going to pay for all of those other things other than cops? Who do you think is going to pay for that? You are. So why in the world is Fox right-wing, Next News Network right-wing? Why are they complaining about this? The Founding Fathers would have lost their mind at the amount of governmental offices that are involved in Americans' daily lives. In effect, creating this acronym. All of the different levels of taxes, different levels of regulations, approvals, inspections, insurances, licenses, securities, subsidizing. Now, liberty means that things like this that are unseemly might go on in your neighborhood. See, this is the NIMBY thing. Not in my backyard. It can go on somewhere else, but not in my backyard. And let me ask you guys a question. A lot of folks are like, well, you know what? If there's any crimes, I'll take care of it myself, me and my gun. Okay, let's think about that for just a minute. Let's say that somebody breaks into your home. Let's say it's a guy. Let's say it's you're not there. Your wife's there, but she knows how to use a weapon. It's 2 or 3 guys, and she takes them all out. Now, what's the next thing you would think you would do? Well, you'd call the authorities, right? Because you'd have 3 corpses in the house. Well, what would the authorities say? Is it the danger is past? Nobody is currently under any threat. So, okay, well, since you've taken care of the problem, no need for us. You see, that would have been how the founding fathers would have had government handle it. Look, if you've already dealt with the issue, it would then be incumbent upon you to get rid of the corpses out of your own home. Think about that for just a minute, especially if a lot of guys be like, well, okay, it wouldn't be fun. What if it was your wife or your girlfriend or your daughter? I've got even a better one. Guys, what if you come home and you catch your better half in bed with someone and you tell him to leave and he doesn't leave? And then you call the cops. Say, well, is she also a legal resident of the home? Yeah. Well, is he committing any kind of a violent crime? No. And he is her guest? Yeah. Well, nothing he can do. He can stay as long as he wants. Because no violent crime is being committed. Imagine just having to deal with that. Just go out to the kitchen, make some dinner, and kick on the TV and wait for things to be over. And just if there's bodies laying around, well, there's bodies laying around. You see, people think about it's like, Florida Maquis, these are all functions of government that we need. Well, guess what? Apparently not. Let's go back to the grievances. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. You see, I have heard so many conservatives talk about how we can't just disband our active duty army. The Russians would invade and the Chinese would invade. And you don't think North America had enemies back then? You don't think North America had enemies back during the time of the founding fathers? And they still allowed for no standing army. In fact, it was one of the grievances that there be a standing army. He is affected to render the military independent of and superior to, quote unquote, the civil power. Now that is something that a lot of people would be like, how many videos? I want to hear it down in the comments. Like, well, Trump has the military on his side, and he's going to do this, and Trump's military is going to do that, and there's going to be military tribunals and military beheadings, and the military is going to... How many videos of people, singing and lauding and praising the U.S. military as the people who are going to step in and sweep away the Biden administration and sweep away the deep state and by behalf of Trump and all this kind of stuff? This would have made the founding fathers throw up. Literally throw up. How in the world can you be for this? He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. This as well. All of these things that conservatives are complaining about, that are saying are evidence of failed states like in California or anywhere else, cops not responding to calls that aren't emergencies, or where there's no violence. People are going to lose their mind. You watch how many conservatives lose their mind over this. Because they have gotten so used to this baked-in socialism in our country. Conservatives don't realize how much you benefit from it every single day. 911, emergency responses, and civil courts are all socialism. None of them existed at the time of the founding fathers. None of them were constitutional. None of them. Not even provided for, not even suggested. Localities had sheriffs, and that was the beginning and ending of it. If you had a city and you wanted to have a sheriff, well, then elect a sheriff and then give him the power to have deputies and then get together and put together some money to pay for the thing, and then you do it on your terms. But this broad brush 911 system that every little stub toe, you can pick up the phone and call for the government to come run to your rescue, that when that goes down, that all of a sudden that's the definition of anarchy and chaos, that would be the definition of a return to liberty and a return to the way things were at the time of the founding fathers. And that would terrify people. See, people flip out. I thought it was the most hilarious thing. They would flip out if they saw this going on their street corner or in their neighborhood. Or if they had to deal with the actions of their own ballistic weapon choices. If they actually had to deal with what was left. And don't sit there and tell me that's not the assumption. The assumption it's the video game assumption, isn't it? That you're going to get out your ballistic weapon and you're going to prosecute your own self-defense with it. And then it's all over. The bodies magically disappear. Oh, that's right. You're going to have to call government. You're going to have to call a coroner. You're going to have to call, somebody to come out with a big old van and a whole bunch of people with gurneys to come get that out of your house. Oh, really? So now you need the government. Now you need the government to come clean up your mess, your Second Amendment mess. Huh. Imagine that. See, a lot of people don't think about this. It's what happens when you play too many video games. And I know they sure haven't thought about this. For sure, haven't thought about this. They don't like being reminded of it, but it happens every day. Happens every day in this country. So the founding fathers wanted a place where, caveat emptor, the buyer beware. Whatever your choices were, the long-term ramifications of those choices were going to be yours to deal with and yours to deal with alone. That was the whole point of getting out from underneath a king. So I will leave it there. God bless. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.